friends, Tiffany here. Welcome to my quilting life. So in today's video, it's all about binding. That's right, that last and final step to a quilt that seals off all those layers and call it done. We are going to just have a video only about binding. So let's get to it. I have not one, not two, but 3 table runners here that I have made, and each and every single one of these need binding. They're on that last and final step. So for this top one right here, this one, I chose this green because it looks perfect. This is all made out of scraps. So if it matches, it matches. It doesn't, it doesn't. Because the back of this one is sunflowers. But guess what? The green matches the back too. So table runner number 1 gets binding. That's green. Then number 2 is some funky chickens and roosters that are super colorful. Their border fabric is a yellow with polka dot, so I'm going to continue that theme with yellow and polka dot. And guess what? It matches the back because there's little chicks on the back and they're yellow. So yellow with white polka dot is perfect for that one. And then last but not least, this tea time table runner that I made, it has this green as the first border and the sashing in between the blocks. So I have decided to continue that theme on with this one, and it kind of matches the back. Whether it matches or not, I don't care, because this is what we're going to use. So I'm going to show you how to do binding. I'm going to show you my favorite way, and then ways that other people probably do it too, just in case, because you don't want to just follow my way, because you have to find your own way to do things. What's comfortable for you, what feels good for your fingers when you are wrapping this around. Just make it easy for you. I'm just giving you the starting point on how it works. So we're going to go ahead and start with the cutting. So I'm going to go ahead now and just move all these out of the way and choose just one to start with. All right, we're going to start with the polka dot on yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Now this table runner right here is a 45-degree angle here, but this is a 60 and this is a 90. So binding this is going to be a cinch. There's nothing hard about binding something like this. This binding seam will fall into place beautifully. This one is going to be the same as you would do any square quilt. And then again, right here would be the same as the one on this side. So let's get to cutting. We're going to start with my favorite number, which is 2.5-inch strips. So this is the most common size. Strips that people use for binding is 2.5. And my edge is already straight, so I'm going to go ahead and cut 4 2.5-inch strips. So there's one. To get that number, I don't do any math, but there is an app called the Robert Kaufman Quilting Calculator. I highly, highly suggest that. And I don't know if I can even put a link to an app in the description, but I will try just in case. So I'm going to cut my 4 strips. The reason why I say 4 strips is because when I did the border on this little quilt here, you can see it's about 50-something inches long. When I did the border, I used a whole strip right here, and on the bottom, a whole strip here and a whole strip here, because it is pretty wide. It's quite a few inches. So I'm going to make sure I have 4 strips. When I did that border, I needed 1 strip here, 1 strip here, right? Okay. And then when I did my sides, I had 1 strip for this side and 1 strip for that other side. So this is how I know I have enough strips. And yes, I will probably have this much or this much left. But the fact of the matter is we want to make sure that we have enough to cover it, because you don't want to be too short on your binding and then get all the way around and realize you didn't have enough fabric. So we're going to make sure we have plenty of it to go around. So I chose 4 strips by going off of what I needed for my border. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to open the strips up. They are still folded in half. And I'm going to stack them on top of each other right here. And you can stack them however many is comfortable for your cutting. I try to make this easy on myself. So I'm just going to stack them all up, every single selvage on the one side, right here. Come on, right there. There we go. And I'm not worried about pressing any of this because that'll all come out when we go to do the next step, or the next after this next step. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off all of this fabric real quick right here at the selvage. That way I have some nice straight edges to line up. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to hook these together. So I'm going to just take one to show you. What we're going to do is lay one right here. Now some people do this differently. This is how I do it. So my body is down here. You guys are watching from up here. But I always take my next piece and put it on the L shape this way. And I sew from here down to here. So from this top corner to this underside's bottom corner. And then I flip it and it becomes one solid piece and I trim away that excess. I have seen others where they do the L shape this way, although that seems kind of complicated from the sewing machine because you're always putting your long piece now in the throat of the machine instead of in front of you. I find that this way, even though it's the same, when you sew it on, it's going to be that same thing you're looking for. So whatever way works for you, like I said, the way I prefer is coming down facing me. And you can either draw your line or you can use some seam tape to sew on that line. Then when I get to the bottom of the next strip, I will be doing that same thing with the next one and the same thing and same thing until all of my strips are connected together on the 45-degree angle right here. So let's go over to the sewing machine and sew all 4 of these strips together. Okay, so here at the machine, I'm going to take my first strip right here. And this is what I was talking about. So if you're going to take strip 1 and strip 2, and you're going to make an L shape, just like this. You are actually facing it the way I am seeing it. And then we are going to come to the corner right here and sew down to this corner. So I'm going to start by putting my needle down at this top corner and then stitch. Now I'm going to take this bottom one, lift it up and see, and line it up on the red line on my seam tape. Okay? And then I'm going to sew straight to that, just like this. Then all I do is pull that next piece up to me. Grab another piece, and this is where I say that other direction seems kind of weird. I don't do it enough, but some people put the whole thing in the throat space and do the L shape this way. I don't see the significance of doing it that way because it puts too much mess on both sides. It's probably best to just have it this direction. Again, this is personal preference. I don't have nothing wrong with anybody that does it the other way, but I find that this way is a lot simpler. Okay, so I'm just going to grab that next one, and then all 4 will be connected. So we're going to go ahead and open this up, put it on there, right sides together. Again, I'm just going to put my needle up in this top corner. And then I'm going to sew down to this bottom corner. And here is what the seam tape looks like, just in case you are curious. It has quarter lines and then the center line to line it up. And it's just like washi tape. It comes off, leaves no residue, and you can put new tape down each time. I will put a link to this in the description below the video. That way you can find yourself some. Ever since I started using this stuff, it's been absolutely fabulous for me. I can sew so fast on the diagonal because I just follow that red line. Okay, so now my pieces are connected. The next step is you could sit right here at the machine or you could go to the rotary cutter and cut away a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So there's my about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, as you can see. And then we're going to take all this anyway over to the iron. But for now, while I'm right here, I finger press it to one side. There is also personal preference where some people actually split this open and press their seams open. That'd be pressing it open. Okay, which would be pushing it wide open. I don't find no difference when it comes to bulk, whether it's one side or not, because once it's folded in half, that seam is actually distributed equal on both sides. So it doesn't really matter if it's to one side or if it's open. So there's, again, another personal preference that you can make your own, whether you want it open or not. So again, you can take this over and rotary cut it, or you can sit right here, oops, and cut them right here at the machine before you get up and go over to a table and cut away anything. You can just do it right here. Okay, so there's that. And then I just finger press it for now. It creates one straight strip. I'm going to get rid of these starting threads, and we're going to go over now and press. I'm pretty sure you know how to iron, but if you've never done binding before, this is quite simple. So let's go to the iron and press. Okay, here we are at the ironing board. All right, so there's more than one way to do this. More than one way, but we're going to do my favorite way first. So all we're going to do is place this wrong side up. We're going to fold this in half on top of itself, and you're going to match those two raw edges. I'm going to start right here at the corner, place my iron down, and I use my fingers for this step. So I get it started, and then what I do is I use my thumb in the middle and my first finger on the outside, and the rest of my fingers are on the outside right here. And I just take and I use my thumb to fold it in half and my first finger to line it up. And then I just iron on down, just like this. And then move it out of the way. I usually am not using this ironing mat, the wool mat for pressing binding, but I really wanted to come up close and show you. So now we're coming to a seam. I've already finger pressed it. So technically all I need to do is fold it in half and press it. Just like that. It's very simple. This is the most easiest way. Just use your fingers. Try not to burn them. And just go all the way down. So here's another seam. I've already finger pressed it. It's going to lay nice and flat. I'm just going to go right here, line my fingers back up, and press on down. Again, we're just folding it directly in half, raw edges together. So I'm going to finish pressing this, and I will meet you back at the machine. All right, here at the machine, I have my binding, and I have my quilt. I prefer, this is personal preference, and you can make it your own. I prefer to attach mine to the back first and then wrap it to the front. So I'm going to go ahead and find an end. Oh, there's an end right there. And we're going to make sure that your opening or your raw edge is going to be against the quilt edge, okay? I also prefer to use a seam guide, which is a magnetic seam guide that keeps me at a 1/4 inch. Now you can measure that 1/4 inch by dropping your needle down, line up a ruler to it like this, and then slide your 1/4 inch or your seam guide to the number that you want right up to it. And oops, I dropped things. It happens every video. So again, you would just line up that 1/4 inch line right up to your needle and then bump your seam guide right up to that. So there's my 1/4 inch seam. Now what we're going to do is try not to wiggle the camera. I'm going to line this up right here, and I'm going to start with a pretty long tail. I'm going to come down real quick before I sew and make sure that no seam is landing in this corner. If the first one doesn't land in a corner, then they usually don't. So we're going to go ahead now, and I'm going to leave about 10 inches. You can measure that or you can guess that. All right, so I have now left about 10 inches. You can see right up there. And I'm going to go ahead and drop my foot right here, lining this up with the edge. And I am going to take a couple stitch. There we go. Secure it into place. Keep that needle down. Now I'm just going to hold it, line it up, and sew. I literally sew this on pretty quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and just attach this. And when we come down to this corner, this is that 60 degree right here. Now I need to stop in the center of that. So let's zoom in. So right here is that corner. I'm going to stop right here at this chicken right here. You can make a dot, but I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch away from the edge right there. I know that lighting is not perfect, but I'm going to stop right here. So let's sew to that point. I'm going to put my finger there so I know. I'm going to sew right to it. There we go. I'm going to tilt the whole thing. Ooh, I went beyond because I'm not paying attention. I'm talking to you instead. Turn it like this and just sew right off that corner. Ooh, and it's not focused. And I'm going to sew right off the corner. It's right here at that edge. And it's okay that I went 2 stitches too far. So you can see right here, there it is, right there, where I stopped. You can see those 2 extra stitches right there. That's okay. Anyways, I'm going to make this right here go this way. So normally binding would go this way if you're doing a square, but this one is not square. So I am going to go and I'm going to line my binding up with the edge of my next edge. Okay. So I'm going to line it up right there, fold it onto itself. It does not meet at the edge. You just want this corner right here at the edge, just that corner right there. And now I'm going to come over here, put it under there and just stitch right on it. And then we're going to come down this edge. And again, I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch away from the edge. But this is that 90 degree angle. So we're going to come right up to it. You can pre-mark it if you want. I need one more stitch. And then we're going to tilt it to the side, just like this. Just tilt that whole thing to the side to where you see the edge. Let's move that seam guide so you can see that edge right there. Okay, there's my little edge. I'm going to sew right off of that edge. I only started doing that sewing off the edge thing a few years ago. So there's that. Now this is the same as any other quilt corner right here. So we're going to take this piece and we're going to come over to our right. And we're going to make a 45 degree angle right there. And then you're going to hold it. Put your 2 fingers right here on the edge of the quilt and fold it like that using your fingers. Okay, so now this folded edge is along the edge of the quilt. Okay, hold it in place. Take your hand, turn that whole entire thing, line it up under, and take that stitch in. Now again, I have to have a seam guide because I cannot sew straight for the life of me. I know exactly where it goes every time. So I'm going to put it in the spot that it goes. Okay, and I'm going to sew right on down to that next corner. I'm also going to pull my hair out of it because my hair ends up in everything. All right, again, I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch from this edge. I'll look and see one more stitch. Tilt the whole entire thing. Oh, look at that. This time I got it on where it's supposed to be. Sew right off. Oh, I ran out of bobbin. Look at that. Well, that didn't matter. Backtrack. All right. Now, go right here. Again, with that funky angle. Just going to find that edge of the quilt. Put my finger there. Hold it down. It's not sticking out. It's just kind of crooked. I'm going to go ahead and attach right here. I just sew right onto the edge. Here is a long edge, and I'm going to repeat all 3 of those corners when I get to the other end, and I'll meet you back at the next step. Okay, so we're coming up on this last side. You can see I left my long tail. There's my long tail that I left. Now I'm on this last side, and this one is going to come up over right here. So I need to stop about where I am. So I'm going to go ahead and take a back stitch right there. Now this part I find quite easy. This is the way I choose to do it now. I used to do this differently. I used to use a ruler every time. This is a lot easier. I'm going to keep that long tail, but I'm going to flatten it out. Then I'm going to take the last of my binding, that very end, and I'm going to lay it on top, matching it up with the edge. I don't even have to get up from the machine. So we're just going to match it right here with the edge of that first cut, and then we're going to keep it right here. Everything's nice and flat. I'm going to take this long tail now, and I'm going to flatten it out on top, just like this. And then I'm going to take some scissors. I'm going to tilt it so that you can see what I'm doing here, and I'm also going to put the foot down right on there so it stays where I want it. I'm just going to take my scissors, and now on this bottom side, if you lift it up out of the way, you can see on this bottom side, there's that last previous edge. We're going to line this up on that and make a cut. Now I have exactly 2.5 inches between the two, just like that. So make sure it's hanging over. If you cut it on the wrong side, you'll know. So now we're going to move this out of the way, and you can see this is why I needed 4 pieces. My seam was already there, so I didn't really quite match up. I needed 1 extra piece. I'm going to take this top one, okay? I'm going to open it up and lay it flat. Then I'm going to crunch the quilt right here. Just crunch it up a little and take this bottom one, lay it flat, take that bottom one and make sure that it's straight, that you didn't turn anything, okay? And I'm going to lay this now. I'm going to open it up, right sides together, just like this. I'm going to line them up on this edge. I'm going to line them up on that top edge, and I'm going to do that same initial procedure when I sew the pieces together. I also changed my stitch length, if you guys are curious why I just reached my hand over. I stitch all of these piecings at a 2.0 stitch length. When I attach the binding, I do a 2.5, 2.4, 2.5, somewhere around there. So now I'm just going to sew from one corner using that same procedure with my seam tape to that bottom corner. If I can keep everything lined up, holding that quilt and sewing across. Now before you chop it off, open it up. If it lays flat, then you did it good. And then once you make sure that it's flat, you cut away your 1/4 inch seam. So you cut away that excess. Poof! Finger press it because you don't need to iron it now. You just finger press that to one side or the other and then flatten it all out. Go back about 1 inch above your ending stitch and stitch it on. I'm going to put my seam guide back because, again, I can't sew straight. I don't know why. I have been sewing for many years and I still cannot at all whatsoever sew straight. All right, so I have 2 seams in a row. That's okay. It's going to happen. I'm going to sew all the way down to about 1 inch past my initial stitch. And every now and then I get a little tiny itty bitty pucker, but guess what happens when you fold it over? The pucker's gone. All right, again, my favorite part is doing it this way because that now I get to wrap the binding to the other side. So I'm going to flip my whole project over, move my seam guide out of the way because now I have to do my best to sew straight. And I'm also the kind of person that likes to match my top stitch thread. So once this is flipped over, I want yellow thread. So I'm going to take and put this yellow in the bobbin, and I'm going to have yellow on the top. So give me a second to switch this out. Okay, I'm nice and switched out. This next step is simple. You just pull that binding nice and tight away from the back. and wrap it around the front. This is my favorite way to do this. So it's wrapped around the front. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm just going to start wherever, but I'm also 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the lip right here of my binding. So I'm going to go ahead and start this, and then I'll bring you like front and center as best as I can so that you can see where I'm stitching. But I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge. I also like to stitch with a 3mm stitch length when I top stitch my binding on. So right here at the edge, you can see I just fold my finger under here to push any wild and loose threads under there, or else I clip them. And then I stitch 1/8 of an inch from that edge. So I kind of use the foot that I have on here as the guide. So I try to line this edge up with the center of this side of the foot. That's how I know that I am 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Now I'm coming down to a corner first. So let's zoom out. Here at this corner, I like to take my bottom one first and wrap it on top, okay? And then this little style corner right here is really easy because it really doesn't make a 45. You just need to slightly fold it like this. So you could see all I did was create a crease and match this tip with that bottom tip. Okay, so I'm just going to sew right up to that. I always take one stitch into it and then one stitch out and then one stitch back in and then, oops, sorry, see, I can't do this at the same time. And then turn it and carry on. Okay, so now we're just going to continue on that 1/8 of an inch. And again, it goes crooked. And I'm coming down to this bottom. Let's get it in the visual field right there. So here's this bottom corner. This is going to be the same as any quilt. So don't worry about any of those other directions. This right here is the normal corner of a binding. So I'm going to flip the bottom on top. Then I'm going to create a little 45-degree corner right there. And then I'm going to use my fingernail to hold it right there in that place. And then fold it on top for a nice, crisp, and clean 45-degree miter. You can see that this tip matches this tip. Again, I'm going to do that same procedure where I sew down to it. I hold it till the very end. Then I come in one stitch and out one stitch. I always do like a back stitch, always, every time I get to a corner. So I'm going to tilt that whole project. I'm going to use my finger to push this down as I fold it and stitch. So I'm just using my finger to push any stray threads, flatten anything out. My fingernail kind of pushes along the binding to keep it folded nicely. Okay, here's my other corner. I'm going to just push those threads in. I'm going to put the bottom up first. And again, this one's not straight. You just get it flat. And then this one, you just push it down however it lands. It's not like there's no science behind this one. It just kind of lands how it lands. But they match up eventually when you can get it straight like I'm trying to do right now. All right, there it is right there. So again, I'm just going to stitch down to it. Once it's under the foot, I don't worry about it. One stitch out. Oops, right there. Tilt the whole project and stitch down that edge now. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up real quick while I stitch the rest of this up. So as you can see, I actually use my fingers to hold as I go. So once I'm sliding, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but my fingers are actually holding everything. So my other hand is holding down here at the bottom, and then my left hand is not only trying to keep me straight, but it's also going down. Without sewing my fingers, I use my fingers to hold it down to keep from getting any bunching or anything. Like, see, it wants to shift a little bit if you don't hold it. So holding it kind of helps right here. And I just use my finger and go with the flow of the machine. All right, so we're coming up to that starting point. Right here is that starting point. I'm just going to give it a little tug, hold it down. I'm going to get rid of my long starter stitch on the front and on the back. There we go. Holding it down, and I'm going to stitch along until I come to it, and then I'm going to stitch about 1 inch in and then back stitch. So I'm going to try to line that up. I'm about 1 inch in and back stitch. And instead of breaking my thread so that I have that little tail, I'm actually going to put the needle up, pull the project away. Since I back stitched, all I have to do is snip these threads just like that, and then I don't have any tails or anything. It's just a start and stop. So there that is, binding method number 1. Let's take a look. So I like the look when the binding comes wrapped around the front. I don't know why, I just think it looks a lot finished, a lot more finished this way. Is that a way to say it? It just looks clean this way. When you flip it to the back looks nice and clean as well. So you can see my corners right here, these little areas on the back side. It's just as nice as the front. My 45-degree miter right here. It's just as nice on the back as it is on the front. And you can see that everything lines up nicely. Now, with stitching it onto the front afterwards, like this method will have a line of stitching that goes all the way around right next to the edge of your binding. So it'll be about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge that there is a stitch all the way around. But that's okay because it matches. I did coordinating thread, so it matches and it doesn't look dumb. Plus this is the top side. You don't even see that back side unless you're using the back side. So I think it looks nice and clean this way, but let me show you some other ways that people do binding that I don't typically do. This is the way I typically do it. So let's move on. All right, we're going to move on to remember what this green is for. Yep, that's right. It's for this one. So we're going to go ahead and work on this one now. So I don't even know why this was wrapped on a bolt thing. There's not much left. So here's my green that I'm going to use for the binding. This next size is not a size I normally use because I really don't like it tight. So if you have arthritis in your fingers like I do, tight binding is really hard to do. That's why I say that 2.5 inch number is usually the best number. But we are not going to do that with this one. This one we are going to do 2.25 inch binding. I know, it seems so small. We're moving away from 1 complete 1/4 inch of a number. And that can be challenging for some people. So I'm going to go ahead now. I'm going to straighten this fabric up first. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut some 2 1/4 inch strips. And I need 4 for this one as well. Actually, no, I need 3 2 1/4 inch strips. So you can see that big difference. Look at how skinny this is. So we're going to do 3 strips at 2 1/4. Not used to this. I only do it for small projects, wall hangings especially. Other than that, everything gets 2.5 inches. But this, you know, this gets 2 1/4. Actually, no, I do need 4. It's going to hang over. That's right. Yep, I had to look at the quilt to make sure. This one's going to be 4 as well. It's going to have a little bit into that next piece. So here, I'm going to move that out of the way, and we're going to go ahead now in the same procedure that we did before of attaching them. We're going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm just going to stack them on top of each other, just like this, and I'm going to cut all the selvages off at the same exact time because I don't really need them. I try to do that in advance. You can leave them on and give yourself like a little excess lip to come into at the corner, but I'm not going to do that. I usually don't. I cut it off because I'm right here at the blades, so it's easier. So since I showed you how to attach them, I'm going to go ahead and skip that part, and I'll meet you at the ironing board. Okay, so here is another way to do binding. So here we have some binding that I have presently put together, and we are going to do that same procedure, folding it in half, except today we're going to use a tool for this one. So this is the Quilted Heartz Binding Eaze. I will do my best to put a link for this in the description below, but if I can't find it, just know that it's the Quilted Heartz Binding Eaze. It's a fast and easy way to do binding. Now, I do have to be honest here. This mat does not stay. When you start putting your binding through these wonderful little holes here, it likes to move. So we're going to take some pins, and I'm going to pin them right into my mat right here, just like this. I'm going to put one on this side about right here to keep this from moving once that iron is on top of it. We're going to start by folding this in half. And I'm just going to go ahead and do it right here on top of here. Fold it in half and make it just a little bit longer, about right here. That way we can slide it through both sides. All right. So here's my long enough tail. Fold it in half, raw edges together. I'm going to go ahead and slide it through these pins right here. Just like that. And what we're going to do, I need a tail long enough. When I start pulling this through, it's going to start folding it in half. I like to make sure with my fingers that it's still folded in half. This requires a little bit of exercise. So we're going to go ahead and place that iron right there. This is a silicone mat, so it shouldn't do any harm to anything. It is good to lift it every now and then because everything gets really hot. So we're going to go ahead and just pull on one side, folding the other, making sure that it's lined up nicely because this is a smaller binding. Make sure that you pre-press your seams where you attached your binding. I'm going to slide those through. Okay, just keep sliding it through. You're going to see it's going to start getting wet because of the steam, but the steam is kind of needed because it heats it up better as it pushes through. All right, it's been on there long enough. I'm going to lift it. You can start seeing that it starts puffing up and it gets really wet from the steam. Lay it back down. Some irons have like a shut off if you leave it down too long. So you want to make sure that you figure that out before you lay an iron on top of here. These were designed to use little miniature irons, or you can use the big ones just like this. But you can use both. So I'm just sliding it through, folding that one edge. You can see the iron is now beeping at me saying that it's too hot. Lift it up. It starts like having a light that beeps when it gets too hot right there. It's creating lots of condensation though. Put it back down and start pulling through some more. The lighter the weight the iron, the better. This one's kind of on the heavy side, but it works. But a lighter iron might work better. All right, we're almost to that end. Just sliding it through. This is all you do. You get a little arm workout while you're at it because you have to pull on the one side. And you're not stretching it out of whack or anything either. All right, here we are coming up on that end. I'm just going to pull the rest of the thing through, making sure that it stays straight, and it did. There we go. All done. So there we have what the Quilted Heartz tool does, is it folds it in half, just like that. And you still have to help it to fold it in half if you want to have a nice straight edge on this so that both of your raw edges meet up perfectly, especially on the smaller sized binding. But there we have it. So again, I'll try to put a link in the description below for this. But this actually helps. It really does. And it makes it a little bit easier. You just make sure that you are ready for an arm workout, because it does definitely give you a right arm pulling workout, unless you're pulling to the left, which you'll get a left arm workout. So, I mean, you can do binding both ways and build up both of your arms at the same time. Anyways, all right, let's get over to the sewing machine. Okay, here we are with way number 2. All right, so we cut our 2 1/4 inch binding, and now we're going to set our seam guide up to that 1/4 inch. We're going to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. All right, and there we go, blah, 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 right there. Okay, I want it right there. Now, we're going to take this and put it over here. We're going to grab our quilt. It's going to be the same procedure as last time, except we are going to hook it to the front, okay, so that you can see what this looks like when it's attached to the front and then rolled to the back. So again, I'm going to make a tail, but I'm going to also make sure that there is no seam landing in the end. I don't really like when the seams land in the end. So we're going to come up here. We're going to leave ourselves a nice long tail. We're going to line up the raw edge. Okay, raw edge right here. And we're going to go ahead and sew this all the way around, same as normal. So I'm going to zoom around this real quickly. Okay, we've come down here. We are going to backstitch now. And we're going to do that same procedure as last time. So we're going to take our tail here, move it out of the way, flatten this side. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those starting stitches. I'm going to flatten this out. I want it super flat right here next to me. I'm going to grab this end. I'm going to open it up, lay it on here. Actually, we're going to straighten this end up just a little bit. It looks kind of wonky. Okay, straighten it out. Open this up because it's 2 1/4 inches this time. Lay it on here. Smooth this side out over it while we're just sitting here. Go in and make that cut. Okay, so there's my leftover. Again, I needed 4 strips only to have 2 seams next to each other. All right, we're going to move this out of the way, put the stitch length back down to a 2 millimeter. I'm going to open this side up, and I'm going to bring this side up to me. Right sides together. I'm going to line them up, and now you can pin this if you need to put 2 pins in right here, but I'm just going to line it up where it needs to be. Put my needle down, holding both sides as nicely as I can. I'm going to line up my corner here with the line on the seam tape. That's the word I was thinking about. Before I do anything, I'm going to release it and make sure that it fits, and it fits perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a 1/4 inch away. And while it's right here, I'm just going to go ahead and press it. Look at that. I literally needed 2 inches more. I hate when that happens, but it happens, and I cannot control that. So there we go. All right, we're going to put the seam guide back where it goes. Go about 1 inch above where I ended. Changing my stitch length. There we go, right here. I'm going to stitch all the way down. And about 1 inch beyond where I started. And now we're going to sew blindly. So this could go one of 2 ways. You can take this over to the iron and press this back like this, and then fold it over, okay? Or you can take and fold it over like this, and take your binding clips. Let's get a bunch right here. Okay, bunch of binding clips, and we're going to clip all the way around. So I'm just going to go ahead and put lots of clips in all the way around. This helps me because I'm not a blind sewer. Now you can hand tack this down. I don't sew by hand. Some people like to, but I don't like to. I'm just going to continue folding this over and pushing all the, the little threads in there. Folding it over all the way around, and I'm going to clip it all the way around. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So you were probably asking yourself, what was I doing with the scissors in this corner? Well, unfortunately, this 2¼ inch binding is really tiny. So I'm cutting off a little tip at the corner, not the stitching, but close to it, but not really cutting it. I'm just cutting off the edge because, again, this is really tiny, and that 1/4 inch really makes a difference on the 2½ inch binding. This is really close. This is cutting it close for me. So I get rid of that corner to make it a little bit more manageable for my fingers, because again, arthritic fingers make it hard for these smaller numbers of binding. For this 2¼ inch binding, it really makes it on the hard side for your fingers. So I would snip that away, which I did. So you should try too, but snipping it away helps. So just don't snip all the way. You still get a point right here at the corner. You still get that perfect 45-degree miter, but again, this is really tight. So the easier it is on yourself, the better. So I just try to make it easy on myself. All right, so I'm almost done clipping the whole entire thing. Okay. Get 2 more clips on here. Here we go. Last final clip. Right here. Just like that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip it over. And from the top, you can use a compensating presser foot. If you don't know what that is, let me show you. This is a compensating presser foot. It also looks like a 1/4 inch foot, which it pretty much is. It has a line, but you can see that it's different in size on one side. So I used to use this for piecing as well because, well, it has a 1/4 inch there. So, but I don't use it anymore. I actually prefer this instead. But this foot, you would lay right here, and the stitch would land exactly at that edge. So you would have that edge to butt it up to as you're going. So your stitch would land right in the ditch. I'm going to not do that. And I'm going to go ahead with the original way that I like to do it, with the skinny foot. So I'm just going to take and start right here. I'll line it up, and I'm blindly sewing this, but it's clipped down, so it should be good. So we're going to stitch in the ditch now, all the way around, and it should catch that back side. So we're going to make sure right here, I'm going to go ahead and change my stitch length, and I'm going to take a couple stitches back and forth to lock it in, and I'm just going to make my way all the way around in the ditch. or as best as I can, because I'm not really good at in the ditch stitching. Yeah, I'm pretty much sewing on it. So just sew it slowly, and it should catch all the way around. And when you get to these corners, hold it down nicely. I'm still going to do those double stitching where I take a stitch back and forward. And again, try to stay in that ditch. I'm just going to go ahead and put my clips in my lap. Make it easier. Pull it down. All right, and then we're going to sew it all the way around, and it should, in theory, be catching the whole thing on the back side. So I still have a good mitered corner on the back. Again, this is the finicky way of doing things. Again, you can't see what you're doing. Some people say it looks really clean this way. I honestly, since I can't stitch in the ditch really good, you can see my stitching right on top. It's not perfect. You know, the thread color is matching, so that helps. But you have to stay in that ditch. All right, there it is. Snip it away. You saw that I lost that corner. I felt it slipping away up here. So I had to go back and fix that. But I backstitched and came back to it. And you can see I still missed it right there. So now it's time to turn it around and see where we missed. Because I'm going to say right now that I probably missed a lot of spots. Because this, again, is the more finicky way. Look at that. That whole corner didn't even catch. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch from this side. Because I can't control how it's going to go. I don't, that's why I don't do that way. So I'm just going to pretend that it's stitching in the ditch on the other side. And let's hope that it is, because I can't control that. Stay in this edge. Okay, so there's one side fixed. And it missed. It got on top of it, but I can't again see. So it's like blindly sewing. That's why I don't do this way. A lot of quilters I've seen do this because they're entering into shows and stuff and they want it to be pristine. But this way, do not find it at all helpful. Okay, that one is now tacked down, and it also has a pleat in it because, again, I cannot control that. All right, let's go to the next one because there's probably more. So I'm going to continue checking. Oh, missed it right here too. I caught it right on the edge, but it's not connected. So I'm just going to overstitch where I was stitching. this is why I don't do this. But again, I'm showing you the different ways, and I don't do this often, so that's why it's kind of sloppy. All right, keep checking. Looks like it caught it there, good job there. And look, missed this whole corner. So let's try to push this out. This one's definitely not going to be a nice, pretty corner, but we're going to keep checking along. Back stitch, come down to it, pivot real quick. Snip away all the excess thread. Okay, continue on. Looks like it caught that whole side, got that corner good. And I think we just have to check this side, and that's it. Yep, because there's where we stitched again. So we got the whole thing this time, all the way around. Now you can see why I don't do that way. But I wanted to show you guys anyway, because it's a great lesson to know all the different ways that you can mess something up. Just kidding. All right, so let's take a look at this so you can see what I'm talking about. So here it is. Now, this way it does look clean. I mean, even though my stitching is on top, that I can't sew straight, so stitching in a ditch is kind of hard for me. But you can see it does look clean being really skinny on the top like this. But unfortunately, once you flip it over, if it's reversible at all, it looks clean from far away, but it's just messy. It looks sloppy. I'm not 100% on ever doing it that way again. This is probably the last time I'll do it like that, because I just don't do it that way. Even for my show quilts, I put a 2.5 inch and I bind front to the back and roll it to the front. So there is another way though. So if you want to do it this way and you're really confident with your stitch in a ditch, let me find an area real quick that stayed in the ditch. Right here. Here's a nice clean area that stayed in the ditch, and you can see there's nothing there. So it really does look clean if you do it that way. But unfortunately for me, I can't stay in the ditch. Also, 2 1/4 is really tight for binding when you have arthritic fingers. The little wall hangings, I wrap those to the front when I do 2 1/4 as well. I wrap them to the front and I tack them down 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I've really never had an issue with that. And let me show you an example. So here is a little example. You can see that this is a 2 1/4 and it's wrapped to the front. And you can see I just stay along the edge and I still have a nice clean 45-degree miter. So just so you know, you can do the 2 1/4 around to the front and it still looks clean and you're not blindly sewing. So just take that into account if you're interested in trying that method. Okay, time for the last one. Now again, this could be done where you wrap around from the back to the front, or you can do the front to the back. So here's the last table runner. It's going to get this right here, this marble looking fabric, and I'm going to go ahead and cut 4 strips off of this, and then we're going to do what we do best, binding. All right, so let's move this out of the way. And I'm going to show you that next method, which I was talking about earlier in the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these real quickly at 2.5 inches. Just going to slide this down so that it's equal, because it's not very straight right here on the edge. And make sure I get all the layers. All right. You could get yourself a stripology ruler. So this is the Creative Grid stripology ruler. There's other brands that make them. And you're going to line this up right here. And I'm just lining my 0 up. I could have started with that, honestly. So right here, I'm going to line it up. It's on my 0. And I'm going to go ahead and cut 2.5 inches. And then I'm going to cut at the 5. And then I'm going to cut at the 7.5. And then I'm going to cut at the 10. That gives me 4 strips. Okay, so those are my 4 binding strips. I'm going to go ahead and put this away. And we're going to do that same thing. So I'm going to put the Stripology ruler away. I will put links for the Stripology ruler. It goes really quickly. You didn't even get to see that much, but I'll put some links if I can find it in the description. All right, so I'm going to stack these up. I'm going to cut the selvages off all at the same time. And one more. It has a really big edge on these ones. What is it called? The selvage. It's really big on these. All right, so I'm not even going to iron it yet because, again, it's going to go to the iron, but you can see where I cut the fabric and it was folded up so long that it has a little indentation on there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sew these end to end. Here we are, ready to sew it on. Same way as the first time. I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to put my opening right here. There's that opening. It's going to be along the edge. I'm going to give myself a tail. I'm going to make sure that there's no seam right here in this corner. And I'm going to make sure that there's no seam in this corner. Come down quite a bit because that seam needs to go past that corner. There we go. All right, so I'm going to leave a tail about 10 inches or so. And I'm going to attach this same as the last ones. Okay, so like we spoke before in the previous one, we're going to take this over to the iron now. All right, don't mind my ironing board. I spilled water. Here we go. Here's that next method, which I was talking about before. We're going to take the iron now, and we are just going to push this back. Now, obviously, with big projects, you don't have an ironing board big enough to do this. But with these small projects, you should be able to push it back all the way. Okay, and once you have it pushed, then flip it over. And now I know I have even a friend who does this where they glue it down. Now I'm not going to glue it, but I am going to fold and press everything nice and crisp all the way. So I'm going to fold my corners nice and crisp. And I'm just going to do the same as I would at the machine, except I'm pre-folding it down with the iron. Even my corners. So I fold them and then iron over them. Now, if you used a polyester batting inside of your quilt, just know that it's going to melt down and it'll flatten your quilt. So 100% cotton is okay to do this with. It'll fluff back up in the wash. But if you did use a polyester or polyester blend, you will have flattening of your quilt. All right, just going to go ahead and fold this one. sure everything's nice and crisp. Don't burn your fingers. So all of my creases are now permanently formed, making it easier to sew. All right, flop this corner up, that down. Not even sure you can see all the way over here. But again, you can use some school glue to hold this down or something. I don't have any glue, and I really don't need any, so, because I don't really ever do this. But every now and then when I want it to be super precise, this is how I would go about doing it. Everything's folded and ready. So that is the third way to do it. You can see it's kind of lifting up, and you could put binding clips, but you could also see that these corners are precise and pristine. So everything's folded the way you want it. All you need to do now is stitch it down. So you can do it by hand, and it's ready for you. You don't even have to have clips on it. You can just do your little hand binding. It's already folded over and created like a memory crease. You could also see right here at these 60 degrees, they're not much. You're not really folding much. It's just a little tiny fold, and it matches right up. So if you wanted to do like a octagon shaped project or something which has all of these corners, they actually go together really easily. So let's go over to the sewing machine and sew it. Okay, so I'm just going to start right here because that's where I laid it down. I'm just going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from that edge, and I'm just going to stay away from that edge. And it's already nicely folded. I just come into my corner. I do the same procedure where I take one stitch in and out. It just really holds those little corners nicely. And again, I struggle with sewing straight, so I probably should still use my fingers. My mitered corner is all nice and ready for me. Right here at the bottom. Pivot. It's already nice and flat. So I could sew as fast as I want or as slow as I want. Again, nice little mitered corner right here. This one's not really, I guess it's called a miter when it's only a 60. All right, everything's still nice and flat. Corner is still good. And look at that, right around, look how much faster I was able to sew that because it was pre-ironed and I didn't have to fold along the way. Let me get rid of that starting thread. I'm going to match right up to it. Back stitch. Lift my needle, pull the project away, and then snip my thread so that it stays nice and clean with no bunching or tails. Now I did notice on this other side right here that it started to slip sideways, like the fabric started stretching. If you keep continuously having that problem and you're just using a regular foot, try using your walking foot so that it evenly feeds in the back and the front, okay? But unfortunately, it didn't continue on. It was only right here about where that tiny little pleat was. And yeah, so that worked out just fine. That tiny little pleat's going to stay there. I'm not going to worry about it. It's on the back. Nobody can see it. But my corners came out absolutely fabulous because they were pressed down instead. So this method is one of my go-to when I need to have a clean, precise, corners and everything's pressed. I want it to go quicker. I took that extra 4 minutes to fully press it over to the front and make it nice. Again, you can use glue, which will secure it. I don't have any, and again, I'm not going to use glue, but let's take a final look at this. Final look, and you can see it looks so clean having it wrapped around to the front. I don't know, it's just personal preference for me. You can see that those corners with the pressing of this, everything is super flat. It came out flatter than that first one. So you can see perfectly flat all the way around. It's nice and flat here. It was a lot easier to stay 1/8 of an inch away from the edge when it's pressed like that. Let's take a look at the first one where it's pretty much the same thing, but there was no pressing of those corners. You can see right here, they don't stay down as flat. And if you look right here at the one that was pressed, look at the difference. This one sticks up. This one is nice and flat. So if you don't plan on washing your table runner right away, it's going to stay super flat. So you can see again, very flat, very clean. Even though it matches up, it's not as flat, and that corner didn't land exact. So you can see the difference between them. Okay, and again, this being wrapped to the front looks so good to me. But it does look clean when you wrap it to the back. The problem with this one, again, as I said, is staying in that ditch. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 areas that I kind of got out of that ditch. And that's, again, you can use that compensating foot, which will keep you in the ditch, which I should have done. You can do that. But I don't want to always have to keep changing out the feet for my machine. I'm kind of lazy when it comes to that. So I definitely, try to make it easy on myself. Again, but this is the sewing blindly. So it looks clean on the back side, but you can't see what you're doing. You have to pin it. You can press it like we did with this one, and you can also glue it down and maybe it will stay better than clips. But again, that's all personal preference. So you find the way that you like best, you make what you like best, and you have fun with it because it's your quilt and you're having fun. So there's really no exact way to bind a quilt. There's no, oh, you got to do it this way, or oh, you got to do it that way. You make the binding way you do it your own. What's comfortable for you, what's comfortable for your fingers. If you can't handle a 2.5 inch binding, nobody says that you can't have a 2 3/4 inch binding or a 3 inch binding. Nobody says you can't do that. Now, it would be a pretty wide binding to have a 3 inch binding on something with a small border, but say you have a 6 inch border around your quilt, I would put a 3 inch binding around that. That would look cool because then it would be another border. Just remember though, if you're not hand stitching it, you will have that stitch all the way around the back side. So it would be in a lot more than it would be if you did the 2.5 where it's along the edge on the underside. So just remember, make it your own, have fun. It's the final step. That means your quilt is done. Have fun with it. Finish it your own way. But this is just an example of the ways that you can do it. So I hope you enjoyed watching a video dedicated to binding. I hope you try what works for you. Let me know in the comments below, which way did you do it? The first way, which is this way, with no extra ironing, clipping, or nothing. the second way from the front to the back with the blind stitch, or the third way, pressing it all and having a nice clean stitch. All right, I'll see you guys all in my next video. Bye.